welcome back to Cocktails with Kris. Today we are covering margaritas. We're going to look at some tequila-based cocktails, cover a classic skinny margarita, and we are also going to look at a paloma style cocktail. So margaritas can be just about anything. There are some lore behind where the margarita itself was developed and the first recipe appeared. There's a lot of disagreement. And a lot of people say that the margarita really just started as what is known as the daisy cocktail, which is a combination of spirit and citrus and sweetener. And the word margarita means daisy. So it's just some lore that's behind that name, but nobody can really pinpoint where the margarita came from. The paloma cocktail is a grapefruit variation of a margarita. And then of course we see that margaritas take on any number of shapes and sizes. They have different fruit flavors. You can add sangria to a margarita. Of course, there's the frozen margarita. So any way that you like a margarita is good, but I'm going to cover the classic skinny version of a margarita. So it's got a lower sugar content, a little bit more acid base to it, and less of the caloric content. When I start out making a margarita, I want to make certain that I've got nice fresh limes, and I use kosher salt if I'm going to rim the glass. I personally don't care for the salt component, but that is something that in a lot of people's minds is absolutely necessary to the margarita. So typically I assume if I'm making a margarita that I'm going to have salt. I always just ask to make certain that someone's preference is met. I like to make my margaritas in an old-fashioned glass. It is a good size for the margarita. It's a good feeling in your hand. And for me, I think that most cocktails can go into an old-fashioned glass if they're on the rocks, and that's sufficient. Certainly you can use a fancier glass, and margaritas can be made without ice or up if you want to as well. They can be served in some of the fun margarita glasses that you see that have a stem that look like a coupe glass. But for this purpose, I'm going to use that old-fashioned glass. And for my paloma today, I'm going to use a cooler glass. I'm using a sparkling grapefruit component for my paloma, so I like to have a cooler glass so those bubbles can rise and really get into the cocktail and make it nice and refreshing and bright. I am using a silver tequila for both my margarita and my paloma. This time I'm using Hornitos by Sauza, and this is just a really nice plata or blanco tequila, something that hasn't been aged, so it doesn't have those woody flavors or the flavors of caramel that develop in an aged tequila. This is bright and citrusy and really allows the flavor of the agave to shine through. Typically, you'll see margaritas with some sort of an orange liqueur. This is Cointreau. It's similar to triple sec. You can also use a cognac-based orange liqueur like a Grand Marnier if you'd like, but this is a component that adds citrus, cuts the taste of the agave. It's going to be something I omit from my skinny margarita because it's also got a higher caloric content. It's got sugar in that liqueur. I am choosing to use agave syrup or blue agave for my sugar component to my cocktail because it's got a lower glycemic index. And a lot of the times you'll find a skinny margarita recipe using agave if it doesn't use some sort of a liquid sweetener that doesn't have calories at all. And then I use fresh lime juice. You can use a sweet and sour base. You can make your own sweet and sour base, but for my purposes, I like straight lime juice. Nice fresh lime juice doesn't have as much bitterness. And so if you squeeze your lime juice right before you're making your margaritas, that's ideal. I'm starting with my glass, and I'm going to take a wedge of lime and run it around the rim of that glass. You can also double use this lime as garnish later if you'd like. Once I get that covered in lime juice, I'm going to just dip it into my salt and cover the glass. If you put that salt on a plate, it's going to do just fine, and you can utilize that for several drinks. I've put a heavy salt rim onto my margarita glass. I want to make certain that I do this before I add ice, of course, and then some of that salt is going to fall into the glass. That's just fine. I'm going to use a shaker for my margarita. So I'm going to put ice into my shaker tin. Once I get my ice in, I'm going to measure my spirit. So I'm going to use 1.5 ounces of Blanco tequila, and I'm going to place that into my shaker tin. I'm going to use 3/4 of an ounce of fresh lime juice. I'm shaking my lime juice because I've let it sit for a little bit after juicing it. I want to make certain that everything is well mixed. So I'm going to measure 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice. You can adjust your margarita recipe if you prefer more citrus flavor, if you prefer more or less sweetness, and if you prefer higher tequila components, you can do that as well. I'm going to use 1/2 ounce of my agave syrup. And I say agave syrup, it's just straight agave syrup that you can purchase at the grocery store. I haven't done anything to dilute that. I'm going to let that run into my mixing glass and get more of the agave. And then for a margarita, I like to shake the margarita. It adds a frothy component. It's really going to break up that agave and get it mixed in with the other 2 ingredients. Now you can see, if you can see really well at home, that I now have a frost layer on the outside of my shaker tin. That means everything is chilled, but I like to really shake this well so it does have that frothy component to it. So I'm going to shake it just a little bit extra. Then I'm going to fill my glass with ice. I haven't done this previously because I don't want the ice to start melting and further dilute my cocktail. Now, once I get that glass nice and filled with ice, I am going to take my Hawthorne strainer and I am going to strain my margarita into the glass. Going to give me just enough that I can get into the salt and get into the margarita itself without losing all of the salt into the glass that I've worked to get onto that glass. It's a beautiful presentation. You can add a wedge of lime, of course, if you like a little bit more lime, squeeze that into the cocktail. There's your classic margarita using a silver tequila. Now for my Paloma cocktail, I'm going to start with the same basic ingredients. I am going to use a Fever Tree pink grapefruit soda. I love this product. It's newer to the market. It's got bubble to it. It's already got sweetener in it, so I'm not going to add sweetener to my cocktail in this particular recipe. And then it's got this beautiful pink grapefruit flavor. You can also make a Paloma cocktail using lime juice, tequila, grapefruit juice, and simple syrup, and then adding a basic soda water to it. There are many variations to this cocktail recipe as well. I'm going to start again with my shaker tin, and I'm going to add fresh ice to my shaker tin. I'm going to take my silver tequila, and I'm going to add 1.5 ounces of silver tequila into my shaker tin. And then I'm going to take 1/2 ounce of lime juice. I'm using less lime juice in this recipe than I did in my margarita because I'm also adding the citrus and the bitterness from the grapefruit into this cocktail. So this is more to give it that kind of punch of bright citrus. Now you can stir this or you can shake it. I'm going to go ahead and shake this just enough to chill. And now that I see that it's chilled on the outside, I'm going to stop. I'm not really concerned with the froth. I'm going to take my cooler glass or my Collins glass, fill it with fresh ice. And then I'm actually going to do something that I've learned over the years in the industry, and I'm going to get my spoon into that glass. As I start to pour my tequila and lime juice into that glass, I can work the spoon further into the ice that's already in that glass. And this is going to help me mix in the soda. So I poured off all of my liquid. I've got my spoon that I can get down into that cooler glass. If I need to stir it, I can. And then I'm going to take my pink grapefruit soda. Now this does settle a little bit. So before I started, I turned it up and down a little bit and wanted to let those bubbles go back from the carbonation. So I am actually going to pour the soda down my spoon as I twist the spoon. And I am going to attempt to get some of that grapefruit soda down into the bottom of the cocktail as well. This is going to help you mix. Otherwise, you're going to have everything settling to the bottom that you poured into the glass first. Beautiful color. This is such a fun soda. And then I'm going to carefully pull that spoon out and try not to waste any of my cocktail. This drink can also be served with a salted rim. I don't prefer salt with my grapefruit, but if you are a fan of a salty dog or just love salt in general, you can also put salt on the rim of your Paloma cocktail, but just a nice kind of bright refresher, still a tequila base and a little bit more punch with that grapefruit. Enjoy.